Hello there, I'm another Magento dev. In this video we're going to look at how to take advantage of technologies like Vue.js, or specifically Vue.js, Tailwind, and how to compile those things in Magento. We're going to be looking at how to set up that module, how to use the block basically to be able to get information into that that Vue.js front end, if you like. It could be a full Vue.js front end takeover. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in this video, construct the boilerplate that I'm going to put on GitHub. And it's going to be a module that you can install into Magento and extend how you wish. Okay, so I think the best way to approach this and to transfer this information from me to you, the viewer, is for me to just do it. For me to just build it and not talk about it too much. I will talk on my way through, but essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a Vue.js sort of mess about that I did in a theme, and I'm going to start porting bits over to an actual module that I'm going to put on GitHub that we're going to be able to utilize to bootstrap your project if you want to use it. And I have tested this. It's a viable solution to a front end in Magento. It's really decent. So what do I need? So I've got a basic Magento install here, 2.4.5 P1, I think it's the latest one as of recording. And why am I not using a theme? Well, I'm not using a theme because what I want to do is, as I said in the intro, is I want to utilize the Magento block. And I want to customize the information that I'm bringing into my Vue.js app. Because the idea with this is that essentially to get the performance that I want on a Magento site, I've got to throw out Magento. I've got to throw out all its baggage, and I've got to bring in just the bits I need. And part of that is using the API, and part of that is using the Magento block. The best place for that is in a module, a custom module. So let's crack on. And the next thing I'm going to do here, or the first thing I'm going to do here, is I'm just going to add a code folder because it's brand new install and you don't get one. So all of our modules go in the code directory. And I've got a handy extension which I've talked about on my channel many times, and if you are a regular viewer you will know of it, and it is called the Magento Wizard, and it helps me create a module from scratch. So I'm going to throw this into a folder called Adam. That's like the parent folder, if you like, the vendor, and I'm gonna call it Vue. What's a good name? Components. Vue components, and this will create me a little module from scratch. There we go, and it's giving me all my boilerplate code. Everything I need to sort of start with this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start constructing my folder structure so I don't forget anything. So the first thing I'm going to need is a block, and I'm just going to have a block folder because I know that I'm going to come back to that, and I'm going to write some customizations for getting basic things in Magento, which we will come on to. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to throw in a Vue folder, and I'm going to, it's not capitals, it's Vue, and then this becomes my front end. So this is essentially going to take over, well, essentially I can make it take over the entire Magento front end, so the full thing. I can make it override a theme, which is handy in this situation because that's what I'm going to need to do. So the next folder I'm going to add is the front end folder, because this module is purely front end, and then it starts to look, if you're a theme developer, it starts to look a bit more recognizable. So within here I'm going to have a layout folder, which is going to be very important, and in here also I am going to have a, hang on a minute, templates folder. Not going to be in there. That's just VS Code playing silly beggars. Right, so my front end, yep. So in here I've got my layout, which is, as I say, going to be able, I'm going to utilize this to take over the theme, and templates. So in the templates folder, because this is a Vue.js app, I need to write a really sort of basic PHTML file, which is gonna have my. So obviously, you got to come to this video with a bit of a prerequisite of Vue.js knowledge, like or at least all of these types of frameworks need a sort of DOM element to mount to, the best way to put it, and we're going to create that in Magento core in the Magento module. So PHTML, and all that needs to be essentially is a div with a ID of your naming, really, and usually it's something like that, and then we're going to mount Vue.js to this, and so the next folder we need is the web folder, and this is where our Vue app is going to live. Okay, so essentially this is not a standard sort of out of the box Vue build. So if you look on the docs for Vue, you can sort of like get it going with one line of sort of npm code or yarn code or even npx code, like almost like a Vue create app, and it builds all your folder structure, and it throws in all your config files and all that type of stuff. So obviously, for me to be able to manufacture this for Magento, I've had to kind of do it a bit manually. So I'm going to give you in this repository the file structure as we need it for our purposes, not necessarily exactly how Vue is. And once you've got to this stage, you're going to be okay, because then at that point you can use Vue app, Vue docs, you can do what you need to gain the sort of intricate knowledge to be able to utilize all of the same Vue 3 methods of workflow, is the best way to put it. So in this folder, I need a folder for my Vue app, and I'll call it Vue app, because that's nice and easy to remember. I also need some folders to compile my Vue app to for Magento to use, and the usual folder structure you would go for, and as I've said, you've probably seen this in some of the other videos, is you have a JS folder, a CSS folder, and possibly an images folder as well. So these basically are what Magento compiles to static content in places where you can then you reference these files in things like your heading, your layout, or well, yeah, you're going to use your heading, your layout, because what I want to do is I want to remove require.js as well, but later down the line. So I'm not going to use require.js, which is obviously Magento standard. I'm not going to do it, bypassing it to get this to work in a leaner way, basically. Less code. We're going for less code. So in here, what we need now is we need our basic core sort of Vue.js build or files, and we're going to add a couple of files. We need a source file, and these will become sort of these will look sort of familiar if you're a Vue dev. In here you would also have things like your pub folder, maybe your dist folder, and things like that for compile, but we don't need that. Like if you was to install this using Vue's command line, you'd get all that, and we don't actually need it. So, but what do we need? Well, we need arguably a Vue config file. So we'll have a Vue config file. That's not going to go amiss. We might use that. I haven't used it yet. We're not necessarily going to use it for in this tutorial, but I'm going to put it there because I want it in the repo, because we might need it for future. And this is like this standard what Vue puts in there from scratch for you. So I'm just gonna copy that. We also have in our build a git ignore. So I'm going to put a git ignore in there, because it's always best having one just in case you throw something in and it pollutes your repo. And I'm just going to have that as standard. That's like your standard git for this type of project, like hiding M files and that, which you may need depending on your integration that you choose, because this is sort of agnostic of integration. You can use anything to integrate with this. Obviously it's in Magento, so it's likely we're going to be integrated with Magento, right? But we can use any other CMS sort of headless sort of CMS to be able to populate our content if we want to. Like in the live stream I use WordPress. WordPress is great for providing sort of like CMS based content in all sorts of different reasons, and I'm able to utilize the power of WordPress to build our CMS pages in Magento, for example, using this headless approach. But you can, as I say, you can use anything. You also, in the source directory, actually, yeah, okay. So the source directory is going to be where we place the view, the stuff that's more recognizable as a view. Excuse me. And the folder structure, by its sort of most basic essence, is assets and also components, which becomes very useful. Will become very useful in the future. And then the most important file, arguably, is our app. Oh, it isn't actually our most important file. I've missed one out. But I'm gonna put an app file in there. Also, one of the equally as important is our main.js. Now, our main.js is important to Magento because this is the file what's going to reference all of our Vue JavaScript, and then Webpack, we're going to install it in a bit, is going to compile all that into readable JavaScript code for Magento. That's how it's going to work. Right, so what do we need in these two files? Well, in our main.js, it's really simple, right, from the outset. And all we're going to need, first of all, is we're going to import create app from Vue, right? First thing we're going to do. Now, it's going to kick off about this for now is VS Code, because I haven't installed Vue yet. I haven't installed I haven't done the yarn install yet, but we're going to set it up, then we're going to run it. And if we get any problems, we'll work through them. And by the very sort of most basic setup is we're going to have to import our app, which is this guy here. We can extend this going forward, and I will show you how to extend it to make it a bit more Magento friendly, is probably the best way to put it. But most basic is we can throw this up using these 3 lines of code, like in here, which is brilliant, because we're going for less code. Right, and so the next thing is we're going to set up our app, which we just need some Vue boilerplate code in there. I wonder if I've got like a... Hey, there we go. Right, so we've got this as sort of our most basic stuff. We've got a script tag if you need it. I don't think... sorry, a style tag if you need it. We don't really need that. And we're just going to write some, just so it's sort of more valid, we're just going to write some basic Vue code. Usually you get this when you install Vue. Just to sort of, you want to prove to yourself it's working once we get it all installed. So we're going to say, so once this is all working, this is what we should see on the page, right? We should see hello Magento in a Vue context. So onto the page. So that's good. That's good. Next is how do we install Node, basically, which runs our Vue app, and where do we install it? Well, we actually install it in the folder above. We actually install it up here in front end, right? That's where we're gonna put the rest of our sort of config files, if you like. And the first one we're going to start with, and this is where it gets a little bit more sort of bespoke, if you like, and I've kind of worked on this to get it working. But you'll get all this setup code, which is a gift from me to the world, Package.json. But conceptually, this is how you would build. This is how you build JavaScript apps. This is sort of like majority standard stuff, which hopefully you're getting used to. I'm going to certainly start doing more videos about it. So what am I throwing in here? Just like sort of like as if it don't matter, right? Well, all of this matters. Now in here, you can see I've got a bit of extra stuff which I ain't come to yet. I've got Tailwind, which I want to throw in there for us to be able to use. I've got Swiper, which I want to throw in there for us to be able to use. Swiper is a really good sort of library for, well, swipers, sliders and stuff. And I've got Vue 3 look, and Webpack. I've thrown Webpack in. We don't necessarily need that, but you might need it for your customizations. All of this you can go through, and if you're experienced enough, you can either take out, can add, right? But this is essentially going to add me my core dependencies, which is yeah, what I need at this point. Which is what I need to sort of start, and then I'll, you know, everything's bespoke. Once you're in this area, you're feeling your way through it, and you're building on project per project basis. So I can't tell you that you need all these things, and I can't tell you exactly what you're going to need for your project, but it gives you a good start and it gives you a good grounding. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to throw in my Webpack config file, and this is the God file, if you like. This is the guy that understands what I'm trying to do with JavaScript, with Vue, and it makes it readable for Magento, and it does a lot of work with regards to my ecosystem and my sort of the best way to put it, my workflow. And you've seen me use this before on other videos, I'm sure. But Webpack is really good for working within sort of standard LAMP stack applications and making JavaScript and CSS small and manageable, and making your workflow auto reload and all that type of stuff. It's really good. So what have I got in here, right? I'm bringing in Tailwind because I want to compile that, but for now I'm just gonna comment out Tailwind, and I'm gonna put it back in once I've properly installed it, because I just want to test this. I just want to give it a test run. And I've also referred to my plugin here, look. So I'm copying like I have to. So as part of my workflow, I want to compile all my assets when I make a change, and then I want to copy those assets, the JavaScript and the CSS, to my static content, and this is set up for blank theme. I want to compile it and set it up and send it to blank theme. I think I've actually installed Luma, but yeah, I'll change that. So it's a simple config thing. Obviously, you can probably make this more readable using variables like I've done in other projects, but let's not worry about that right now. And that's going to copy my assets over, and that means that when my browser reloads using auto reload, I'm going to see my changes like straight away, and it's going to work like we would expect a modern workflow to work, to pan out. So yeah, this is like the basic setup. Now I've got my Package.json and my Webpack. Well, I could have done this from just this point. Package.json in there. I'm going to install everything basically. So I'm going to open an integrated terminal because I need to be in my front end directory where my Package.json lives, and I'm going to run yarn. And yarn's going to go and get everything. And we're going to just wait for that. So yeah, what this does is essentially we're able to target specific areas in Magento that I feel need speeding up. I feel like carry too much shit and too much baggage that no matter how many incremental improvements you're going to make towards performance and site speed and just general UX for the customer, you're always, or the end customer and your client as well, the end result is always going to be held back by the amount of baggage that Magento throws onto the browser. All the JavaScript, even if you bundle it, even if you minify it, it's unnecessary. And in the modern web ecosystem, the modern web world, it expects the most minimal code to the browser. Our fucking self-appointed sheriff of the internet, Google, dictates this. It wants your sites to be as light as possible. And this is one of the only ways you're going to be able to do this in Magento, is by taking away Magento and statically generating your site. I know it statically generates anyway, but it statically generates with CSS that you don't need, JavaScript you don't need, bloated HTML in certain circumstances, particularly with the page builder. So this is a way around it, and yeah, it takes a lot of work, but you learn a lot as a dev, and you know, it's one of them things that we've got to move to, I think. But anyway, without further ado, that's all installed. So that's installed my node, and I've just got to be careful because, and I'm just going to copy this in. If you're using a repo, I put my git ignore in the wrong place, didn't I? So I want to bang a git ignore in here, and all. Hang on a minute, what am I doing there? Paste. And all I'm doing is ignoring node there. I'm not even sure if I'm using git on this project as yet. I'm not, but you get the gist. Right, and so that's all installed, right? So now, this should all sort of expect to be compiled into these places, right? So before I do start compiling things, I'm also going to install Tailwind because I want my CSS to compile as well. Excuse me. Right. So how do we get Tailwind into this? So we've already installed Tailwind here on packet in the Package.json. We've already pulled it in Tailwind version 3.1.8 or above. And Tailwind's really simple to install. Like, there's loads of good docs out there on the process of doing this. I'm going to give you a Tailwind.js config file in the repo, ready to go. The purpose of this video is that we create something ready to go that you can pull down from GitHub. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a file called Tailwind. You could call it Tailwind config. I'm just going to call it Tailwind, and it's going to live in front end. And the good thing about this is if you've got the Tailwind extension in VS Code, just the very presence of your Tailwind file in there is going to give you your code, predictive code, you know, for Tailwind, and being able to access that library, which is mega useful in terms of a workflow. And all I'm going to put into this by default is where I want my content from, where my application, so where Webpack essentially, or where Tailwind and Webpack and Vue expect to find Tailwind code, and it expects to find it in my app. So it expects to find Tailwind classes in my components in Vue app source, right? So it's going to go look for it there, and then it's going to compile that to readable CSS code, which is going to be deployed to this folder here, right? And I'm not sure at this point if I need a Sass folder. What have I got in Sass? Yeah, I do. Right, so we're going to compile this slightly different. Sorry, I missed out a folder, which means I've sort of missed out a step in that process. So I want an SCSS file in here because this is a Magento site. Not my entire styles sheets or my entire code base in terms of CSS isn't necessarily going to be contained in my app, my Vue app. I could write CSS for other parts of my theme that aren't using this, because the whole point of this is that I maybe just want it on CMS pages, and I want to leave the product pages because I can get them fast enough, or I want to leave the category pages, or I don't want to be rebuilding the entire checkout. I'm not saying I want to take out the entire Magento. The whole point of this is not replacing the entire Magento. The whole point of this is targeting pages in Magento that Google's going to expect to be fast, which is like your CMS pages, your home page, things like that. You can rebuild your product page if you've got time, and you can do this, and you can use Vue for it, but there's a lot of complexities in there that are difficult to rebuild. You might as well sort of, like, at first, at least, baby steps. Keep those intact, and one of the ways to keep those intact is to not be so aggressive with where we mount this Vue app, and therefore we might have to compromise in that we might not be able to use Tailwind for our entire site. We might have to write some Sass for, say, the header, for example, or because that needs to appear everywhere, which needs to be more standard across the Vue rendered pages and the Magento rendered pages, or the traditional theme pages that are rendered Magento. So you see what I mean? So we're giving ourselves flexibility, is what we're giving ourselves. So it's a hybrid. It's a hybrid approach rather than a completely headless approach. If that makes sense, I hope it did. Right, and in this, excuse me, is where I'm going to compile, or where I'm going to reference my Tailwind. And for those of you who've used Tailwind before, you will then start to recognise this type of setup. So there we go. We've got our Tailwind base with components and utilities, which is what our Tailwind config file is going to compile to to our CSS here. And in here, I'm just going to create an app.css. Because that is where I'm going to get my code output to. So that can just stay blank. I just wanted to create it so, you know, it's there ready. Okay, so I've got my app. I'm expecting a message. Now, how do I get this to mount to Magento? Well, that's the next step. First, I'm going to just test my Webpack. So I'm just going to and see if it compiles. Make sure I've not missed out any files. I don't get any errors at this point because I've done a lot of setup without any testing just yet. So it's a good idea. I'm not going to do yarn watch. I'm going to do yarn mix, which should try and compile everything. And we'll see how we get on. Okay, that looks promising. So what has it created? CSS first of all. Right, it seems to have compiled that. Which is okay for now. I'm not sure if that's exactly right because I haven't written any Tailwind yet. So we'll test that in a second. Again, our main JS should have been compiled to. Yep, that's looking good. I mean, obviously it's not minified or anything, but for dev purposes, that's looking good. I just want to check at this point that I haven't got any sort of rogue files put anywhere where they shouldn't be. Because this was an automatic sort of Webpack's moving stuff about, I don't want to see any sort of, that's why Tailwind hadn't compiled. I didn't set it to just yet. So we'll try running that again. Okay, it's successfully compiled in like 2 seconds, which is good. There we go. That looks more like Tailwind, right? So this is the actual file that the browser's going to read, yeah? Again, it's not minified yet, but we can come on to how that all works. So this is the bare bones of where you'll start, basically. So this is in terms of the app, this is the one that I'm going to ship to GitHub, and then you can start. Right, I might in time add a few extra sort of starter components and API helpers and things like that to it, but if you've got a bit of nous about, you can figure it out from here. And my viewers have got a nous. They've got nous in spades. So, next, we need to try and get this working in Magento, front end, right? And the best way to start, best place to start with that for me, is replacing the content here. Now this isn't the best way, sort of like the final article, but it's can we get it working, right? Can we get our app mounting in Magento? So we need a layout. This is where we'll start. We need a layout that for now is just going to, as I said, baby steps. We're going to just affect the CMS pages. And I'm going to use CMS page.view. Now I could, if I just want to test it on the index, use CMS index. But I'm just going to use CMS page view. It's going to take out all my CMS pages and hopefully mount a Vue app. And I'm going to explain in other videos how we can then make this dynamic. But in terms of testing, this is the best place to test it, or one of the best places to test. Excuse me. So what do we need to actually include rather than remove at this point? Well, one of the things we need to do is, do you know what? I'm going to do it CMS index. So I'm going to say CMS index. I'm not going to take over all the CMS pages yet because I'm not going to be able to get onto how to make it dynamic, which is going to be essential. So this is essentially going to affect only the layout of the home page, CMS index. Obviously you can check this out if you want in Magento's vendor core, which I've been through 100 times on this channel. Always do your working out and figure out if you're not comfortable of why CMS index is the layout page that we'll want to target. If you're not comfortable with it, have a look in the vendor, trace it through, and eventually spend half an hour and you'll understand it. Okay, so this is throwing in some boilerplate code for me. And what I want to do is just, mount my new block, if you like, which I haven't written yet, so I'm not going to utilize our block yet. I'm gonna pass in a different block, the Magento template. And forgive me, I have got this referenced on the other screen to speed up things. There we go. So, what am I building here? I'm building a block that's going to go into content. So, and that looks like that. This is like my default block. And this is, you know, giving it a name. I mean, I don't like the way this does this, so I'm going to call this something else. I'm going to call it Vue.app. And then it's expecting an index, but I've already created mine, and it is a app.html. But it's just in the root there. I'm going to save that. And what we're going to do is, I'm just going to remove the page, essentially, first. So I'm going to say reference container name. So this is how you would remove something in Magento. I think it's content. It might be main content. I can't remember which one I did. Just bear us a second. I want to get this right. Yeah, main content is the one I'm going to remove. So this one, which is the whole thing. Remove. Remove true. So this, well, essentially, let's test it's working. So I'm just going to remove this for a second, save it. Let's go to the old front end. Right. I've just got to run, because I've added this as a module and I haven't installed it yet. I've just got to run the big four. So, right, we're back, fresh after setup upgrade, decompile, static content deploy. We're back. And I just want to check that my module's all working. So this isn't exactly going to work at the minute, but if I just do a refresh, it's going to remove my content because of this command. Now I've been a bit sort of gung-ho with what I'm going to remove, because I'm removing all the content and then I'm not able to actually mount my app to anything because it's all gone. So we don't necessarily need to remove this. We need to reference it. Let's just get this working. Let's just get our Vue component mounting to the existing page. That's probably as good as anything, and then I'll explain how we can extend on that and start removing the other bits real quickly. I'll go into that. So okay, this is all okay. What we're going to need to do is we're going to need to reference that container. Let's just get rid of this, and I'll just save this and it'll come back. Right. So with us referencing that container, and let's just have a check. Look, you can see there, we're mounting our block to the page, but it's right down the bottom there. It's down here somewhere. See, sort of like coming up near the footer. We just want to get this working. So for now, I'm just going to do a before everything. Try and get this to the top. So we're just basically adding our block to the main content. There's no point in removing anything yet. We just want a sort of proof of concept. Can we get it working? And yeah, there it is. So now we need to mount our Vue.js application to that, right? So we're going to expect to see it up here somewhere. Okay, so how do we go about doing that? Well, we've got to include our JavaScript and our CSS for our application. We've got to include it in the page, right? So what we need is some header blocks, and we've got our app CSS, which we're compiling with Webpack, and we've also got our main.js, which we are also compiling with Webpack. And now, because this is an application that is mounted to an existing element, you've got to defer this, because the element's got to be there before it can read it to mount, right? So let's just save that, and here goes nothing. There we go. So it's worked, hasn't it? Because earlier on we set it, and that's Vue, right? That's Vue. And just before we sort of wrap this up, I'm going to show you a couple of ways to, like, thanks for staying to the end of the video, by the way. It's been a long setup process, this, hasn't it? I'm going to give you a couple of extra sort of bits of sort of information that's going to help you from this point. So this essentially is our boilerplate. There's our Vue app, and is it working? Right. Well, let's first of all see if our workflow is working. So in here, I'll tell you what, I'll just close this, reopen this, because we should be able to use Vue tools now. So switch on DevTools. Vue is detected on this page. Hang on, I need to turn off my creepy thing blocker. And I also want to switch on my live reload in a sec. So let me just go to here. Now I compiled this earlier. Now I'm going to yarn watch it. And when I'm yarn watching, it's going to look for changes in my application, just make sure there's no errors. So that means build successful, great. That means I can use my live reload. So I can switch this on, and all that's done is it's added the script to the bottom of the page. And also in here we've got our Vue tools, right? And this is like, look at that. This is essential, and this is why this workflow, you know, using these types of frameworks like Vue, for example, with this tool, this is why this workflow is so lean and quick to work with. And you're gonna throw, it might seem that you're throwing out the baby and the bathwater with Magento, but you can build it back so fast, and you can build it back better. Didn't mean to say that. You can build it back, and you can, and the workflow is just superb. So say for example, here's a component, and I just add something else to it. It hasn't compiled, so yeah, it has compiled, but it hasn't updated on the front end, and that is because there's a little trick. So if we just go into our static content, we've sort of got to give it a kick, right? I've got all my caches switched off, by the way. I'm using Luma theme, so I should see in here, look, my Vue components, and I should see my CSS and my JavaScript, right? And it's all compiling, right? So this is, by the way, what I'm looking at when I am referencing it in here, right? These are the files that it's looking for. So if in this occasion where it doesn't update, and you're like, why ain't it updated? It refreshed and everything, right? If we just delete this, we refresh our page again. We're in developer mode, so it should put everything back. There we go. It's refreshed it now. Okay. It's put everything back that I needed. Yeah. It hasn't put the other stuff back because I haven't done it hasn't been a full-on compile yet. Let me just refresh this and see if anything else comes back. No, but these are the only files that we need to update, right? So once you've done that, and like give it a bit of a nudge, if we jump into, let's just remove some of these. If we jump into our application and then I say, we'll change this. Right, now we're cooking on gas. Right, now that's something that Dad's saying it. I'm such a dad. Right, so we're away, right, and we've got our dev tools, and it's updating on the fly. This is amazing, right? And we're also, say for example, we want to whack in some Tailwind. See, it's going to start using Tailwind snippets now. Go for some large text. Save that. Skadoosh. I haven't done the large text. I haven't done the large text, but I'll come on to that in another video. I'll probably come on to that in. Do you know what? I'll come on to it. Have a search. I'm doing a live stream this afternoon at dinner time. So if you're watching this before 12 AM, 12 AM. Midday, on the day this was released, then I'm doing a live stream in a bit, which I'm going to go into all this stuff in more detail. But this is just to get you started. This is the code that you're going to find on GitHub to get you started with this boilerplate. One last thing, bonus feature. I'm going to create a block. I'm going to call it CMS page. Case it properly. Just going to throw in my boilerplate code. And I'm just going to throw in this boilerplate code because it's tried and tested for me. I'm going to tell you what it does. It's going to be on the repo, obviously, and you can have a look at it. So what this is going to do is, for me, and for this type of integration, like, say I want to replace the header. Well, what do I need to replace in the header, essentially? The logo, for example. There's other things, but the logo by default, like most basic, to get a logo showing. So I'm going and getting the logo, right? And then I'm going to pass it to my application. Again, I'm going to come on to this in other videos, how to pass this data from back to front, but here's an example. Sorry, I'm going to come on to it in more detail, but I'm going to give you an example in this one. It's not all of this, but it's some of it. So, just one sec. Because as you start to remove Magento, you start to need some of Magento. So this is the idea of this block. And we're able to pass it into our app quite sort of easily, just using JavaScript. Traditional sort of standard vanilla JS, really. So say, for example, I want to pass in the page ID of this page, so that it will be like home-page or whatever, and I want to pass it into this app. Well, in my block here, I've got my page identifier, right? And this, for those of you who are more clued up, you're going to notice that you're going to be able to use this to make this dynamic and show different content on different pages from other CMSs, right? You'll be able to join those dots, I'm sure. Right? All I'm going to add is a data attribute to this, and I'm going to pass in what I'm getting from my block. So in order to hook this up, I'm getting this from a block, so I'm going to have to hook up this block as well. My block in my index page. So at the moment, I'm going to get the template. So I'm not just going to get the template now. I'm going to get my block, which is CMS page. So this is now going to start passing my data into the block. Let me just refresh this, hope it don't kick off about anything. Now we're alright. And now if I look at this, data ID home look, yeah? So it's passing the page slug into essentially a place where I can pick it up in my Vue app. So here, I'll just show you quickly. I'm able to jump into and go grab. So say for example, I want a created function. I can use a created function to get this, but it has to be, probably needs to be async because I'm going to be using this. I'll make it async because I'm going to be extending it later on to contact API endpoints and things. So I need to use async to go get that, and all I need to do is get the document ID, which is app, right? So that's what I called it, and then I can get the slug like that, and then if I want, I can pass that to my message, and I know it says hello at the moment. Save that. There we go. It's changed to the slug that I'm passing, which is home. So this is it. Like, that was dead simple to get the slug. So this is how you can pass data from your block into Vue.js app. Dead simple. Obviously, there's other stuff in there ready for you. Like there's the categories, which we can pass in if we need them. You've got the root, which is useful. Logo data for when we do the header. That type of thing. So I hope this has given you a gist, a good starting point for being able to get going. And now it's up to you. You run with this and you take this boilerplate and make it a fully blown Magento, make a competitor for Hive theme. we'll call it Vue the theme. Who the theme? Vue the theme. We'll call it Vue the theme. It's going to be free forever in the community. Fork this code, make it, please. Let's do this, and let's make Magento fast as it can be. And with that, as I say, join me later on in the live stream. Find it on my channel where we go into a bit more detail on this. Check out my other videos. Like and subscribe, please. And I will no doubt see you in the next one.